Good afternoon. Today I am joined by Dino Mitchetti, CEO of CV3. Dino is a logistics and e-commerce professional, business consultant, and a remarkable servant leader. Dino, thank you so much for joining us. Very excited to have you here today. And before we dive into today's topic, could you just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself and what your company does?
Sure, absolutely. Roy, great to see you again. Yeah, my name's Dino. I come, my background's about 25 years of CRM, database marketing, loyalty marketing, working with big brands. So brands from back in the day, Circuit City, JP Morgan Chase, Dell, Marriott. Recently, I joined CV3 as their CEO. What CV3 does is we're an e-commerce platform. We work with small and medium-sized businesses. So we offer a platform, which is the core offering, but we also run marketing services for them as well to drive incrementality in their business. So we work with small businesses, scale their business from, let's say, $1 million in online sales and revenue to 5 million, 10 million. So we sit down with them, we understand their core goals, and then we help put programs in place to drive incrementality for them. So a lot of the focus that we've been doing since I came on board is really focusing where I think we have the strongest offering, which is in specialty food, beverages, and gifting. And that's sort of been a shift in our market over the past, I would say, let's say a couple of months now.
Thank you very much. Well, today's topic is the next chapter in management consulting, specifically moving past client retention challenges. Dino, you've been in the e-commerce sector for a long time. You've worked with a lot of organizations from Fortune 100 companies to family startups. I'd really like to dial in on the small and medium organizations where you're working now. What would you say is the biggest challenge in the market currently for these companies trying to retain their clients?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for them as they try to retain and grow sort of the overall business in general is just the marketing industry is shifting and is shifting very quickly, right? And as a small business owner, if you think about it, some of the calls that I'm on, the CEO is the owner, is the operator of the business, is running around and basically coordinating small teams of, either 3 people in the business to up to 15 to 20 people in the business. What I'm seeing across the board as one of the biggest challenges is when they have an e-com stack and a marketing stack, all of a sudden that CEO who's really good at doing something. So for an example, that CEO who started his company 40 years ago making fudge out of their kitchen and now they've got a factory doing it, they've got to come in and understand, the technology world at a pretty deep level, and then they have to manage upwards of 15 different vendors between e-com vendors, marketing platforms, SEO specialists, so on and so forth. So the biggest challenge that we're seeing in the marketplace is these CEOs go there, they've built their owners, operators, they've built their business based off of passion of doing something and selling something where they have a very specific, skill set around. And they're spending a lot of their time managing vendors and becoming vendor managers. So I see that as the biggest challenge in the marketplace for them in terms of how they grow and scale their business. A lot of them get stuck because they have to do everything. They're spread thin. And what they're really looking for, in my opinion, is, and from my conversations I had, is somebody to say, listen, I'm going to let you run this for me. I trust you. Here are my goals and targets. I'm going to let you run this. And basically, on a weekly basis, you're just going through reporting metrics, but that one single partner that's controlling that whole ecosystem for them and helping them drive growth in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ability to scale the business really requires those additional skill sets to remain relevant and continue to drive the business forward, but is maybe not something that business owner or founder found themselves doing early on in the business. So absolutely.
That's
And
exactly right. And you think about it, and I'll sort of, we'll go through some of the next questions, but the industry has changed so much. So if you think about, we're not that far off from old school like indexing and sort of, Rolodexes and cards where it's like, here are my corporate customers, right? You think about that, that's only 25 years ago. You were using a phone book, right? And people found you in a phone book. So if you think about the shift that's happened in 25 years, and a lot of our clients have been around for 25 plus years, you take a look at the shift that's happened over 25 years towards a full digital stack, where email is the center of your database more than anything else. And now this shift that's going to happen, or that's happening as every company in the world basically comes in and says, we are AI. And they're slapping AI at the end of everything. And for a small business owner, they're like, okay, we know we got to do something, but how much of this is real? And the reality is a lot of it is very real, but you have to know what it means for your business. And I don't expect, a small business owner to understand, how AI is going to transform sort of everything from logistics and operations right through to sort of front end marketing. So that's where you're looking for, somebody who has that skill set and that could drive that in for them in their business.
Makes sense. And as a follow up to that, so how does CV3 unique platform plus agency model help set those e-commerce brands up for that strong customer retention right from day one?
Yeah, from a platform perspective, like I said, we're very specialized, in parts of the industry. So I think platform itself, there's two sides to it, right? I think there are a lot of platforms out there. You've got the big commerces, the Shopify, you've got us at CV3. More or less all the same functionality. We have the same integrations. I don't think there's much differentiation unless you go sort of deep into an industry, which is really where we're focused, is let's go deep into, food, beverage, and gifting, because I think we do things that would be highly customized in most enterprise type platforms. So I think that from that perspective, I think we could provide something better in the marketplace. I think the big difference is being able to bring that technology piece together with the marketing strategy. So SEO specialists, top of funnel specialists, in funnel specialists. So how do we go from, somebody getting to the site, how do we get them to convert? How do we get them to explore more product? How do we get them to come back more often, right? How do we create loyalty with the brand? Those are the areas where you can find an agency or a bunch of agencies to do that, or you bring it all together under one roof and say, you're going to be my e-com platform, and I'm going to ask you to drive leads into the funnel, into the platform. I'm going to ask you to convert them. I'm going to ask you to convert them at a higher conversion rate than we're converting right now, at better ROAS when we're sort of getting those leads into the platform, and then basically a higher, CAC, basically based off of repeat purchases over a certain time period. And I think having a single vendor you're working with that's looking at the end-to-end spectrum of the funnel makes it, I think, really advantageous for a brand, and understanding and being able to pull the levers in the platform. So for us to be able to say within, the e-com platform or within the website, we believe that if you add these three functionalities, we can drive incremental conversion. And then working with, whether it's we are building it ourselves or we're implementing a third-party partner like a Pathmonk as an example, because we know through case studies that it's going to drive better conversion path optimization. It's being able to have that trusted partner that's going to say, we think that implementing this is very low level of effort, very low cost, but high return for you. And being able to have that trusted relationship with the customer, to have that discussion, say, let's try it, let's test it. If it works, we'll do more. If it doesn't work, we could always unplug it and go from there.
And you've mentioned it several times that CV3 offers that extensive marketing expertise right from the start, from email to paid media. Could you elaborate more on how your performance-driven team leverages those specific marketing channels to not only acquire, but just consistently engage and retain those customers over their life cycle?
Yeah, I think we could always talk about sort of the tactics, right? I come in, and I just had this conversation with my team last week. What we do a really good job at is diving into our client's business and really understanding what are the key metrics that are driving the business. So what ROAS do you need to sort of, to continue to drive growth or put marketing budget into these channels? And it's really interesting because we'll talk to clients who are spending $1,000 a month in ad spend, at a 10x ROAS, and they're like, yeah, I'm scared to put more. And what we're really doing is saying, well, let's test in, because I actually think you have enough ceiling to put $25,000 a month into it. And they get really nervous because it's a big number, right? $300,000 a year. And we're doing a lot of education and say, but you understand, if we can maintain a 9 to 10x ROAS, where your target from a margin perspective is 6 to 7, we can keep pushing that till we hit scale, basically. And once we hit scale and you start to see the ROAS come down a little bit, that's where we stop pushing, right? But what we're trying to educate them on is like for every dollar you're putting in, you're going to be getting $7 out. And the reality behind that, take your margin out of it, you're getting $4 out, which is directly into your pocket. So you shouldn't be worried about the cost of marketing because we've created a framework that allows you to spend with very little risk. Because once we start, once that ROAS starts coming down, within 10 to 20% of what your target is ROAS, then at that point we start to take the marketing spend and sort of reduce marketing spend across channels and say, no, we've sort of hit what we feel is saturation at this point now within this market. Now there's always other things we could do to sort of test out other markets and those types of things. But from our perspective, it's like, let's saturate the market, get as many people to your site as we can, get as much awareness to you guys. And then from there, we can then sort of take marketing budget and start to deploy it towards other, let's say, parts of the industry or parts of the market that we may not have thought were a good fit, but we're seeing through ancillary data that's coming in that, we're getting a lot of people from these pockets or segments of the market that we didn't even expect. So let's start to test and invest in that. So that's sort of the approach we've been taking. And I think we've been very effective in terms of talking to our clients, training them. But there's always that hurdle of, I'm really not comfortable spending more than $5,000 a month. And you're like, but I can guarantee for every, $1,000 you spend, you're going to put 10,000 of profit in your pocket until we hit a point where you're only getting 6,000 of profit or 5,000. You say, yeah, I'm not comfortable going below that. And then we stop, but you're still generating value. And I think that's the key thing for us.
And I have to imagine that it only takes one or two very successful attempts at that before you've built the relationship and the trust enough that it's less painful moving forward, that you've proven you can do it successfully.
Proving you can do it. And I'll tell you what we do is we do work with some clients on a rev share model where they're nervous to put the initial dollars in. And we have a client that I just met with today, and they were nervous in increasing their marketing spend. They were doing about $2,000 a month. And I said, I think you can get to $25,000 a month, but I think $10,000 a month is your next step to just show you the value that we believe you're going to increase the ROAS by doing this. And they're like, we're really not sure. We've gone in and we funded the 10K. So I came in and we're at CV3 going to put our own $10,000 into this. Now, the client on the first $10,000 back, they're going to pay us back on it, right? So it's a break even at least. But at least from that perspective, we're putting that money in because we know that we're hitting right now an 8 to 10x ROAS. Their break even is at about 2.5x ROAS. So we're sitting there saying, listen, we'll put the funding in, we'll take the risk on it, but we want to show you that it's possible. And if you don't want to put the marketing dollars after that, we'll continue to fund it, on a rev share basis. We're totally fine with that because we're basically betting on ourselves. And I sit here saying, I have such confidence in sort of the results that we're seeing with our team that I'm willing to make that investment into our clients. It's a win-win-win across the board because clients winning, they're making, way more than we're going to make on it. We're winning because we're building credibility with our clients, credibility and trust. They see that we're invested into their business growth. And at the end of the day, the more transactions that we're putting through the platform, the better it is for us overall as well. So that's what I want happening is driving. I want to drive people to our clients' websites. I want them transacting. That's all sort of positives across the board. And that's what gets me excited about what we're building here at CV3.
And I was just about to ask this, like you took my script, what innovative solutions you've come up with here recently to help address that. And you're literally putting your money where your mouth is and helping clients with a personal investment.
Yeah, it is I don't necessarily think that's necessarily innovative. I think it's sort of outside the box thinking a lot of times. I think a lot of brands won't put their own money in, or a lot of partners like Shopify is not going to say, I'm going to invest $10,000 in marketing budget. And I think that's where it makes us different, right? We truly are partners. I don't have 100,000 clients. I could tell you I have enough clients that I can reach out to all of them in a given month, and I can have a conversation with all of them about how we're going to help them move their business. I have intricate details of their business. I know how we're going to move it. So, we've got hundreds of clients, not hundreds of thousands, and allows us to put that personal touch on the business. What excites me on the innovation side is sort of, what we're doing on the AI side on our platform. So when I came into the business, we were trying to be everything to everybody. And a couple of weeks into the business, I had this, I'd say it was an aha moment. I think it was more of a panic attack at middle of the night. I woke up and I was like, how are we going to compete against the big e-commerce platforms out there? They all, are integrated with everybody across the board. They've got, 15 accessibility partners, even though most of them use the accessibility partner we have. They have, 25 different MarTech solutions you could implement, from Brace to Klaviyo to Zeta to whoever it is. They've got all these tools basically that, I'm not going to be able to compete against on a one-to-one basis. And, like I said, it sort of hit me, let's focus on a niche that we're really, really good in. So, and then let's innovate within that niche. So taking a look at food and beverage and gifting, what we did is this. We've actually created this framework. It's a headless e-commerce platform, so allows us basically to be extremely flexible and nimble in our dev and basically how we integrate partners. But at the same time, we're going to focus this specifically on the food and beverage industry, and we're going to relaunch and rebrand in a couple of weeks. But at the same time, what we're doing is I've asked my AI team to come in. I was like, enough sort of talking ethereally around what AI is. I want you to build out 5 to 7 agents, and those agents are going to be very specific to perishables and food industry. And I want you to build out agents that are going to solve problems for our clients. So we have a client advisory board very specifically that says, these are my biggest challenges from an industry perspective. And then we come in and say, this is how we're going to solve these challenges, right? So I'll give you 2 examples. I don't know if these are agents we're going to build because I let my experts do this. I dabbled in AI. I sort of learned a little bit about it in the past couple of years. But the reality is I said, what if we had an agent that said, we have inventory X that's perishable, that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we have too much of this inventory. Your AI, basically the agent, automatically identifies this. What most brands do is they take that product and then they go in and they drop that product onto sort of the hero images on the website and they discount it 50% because like, we got to move this, we got to move it. What if the AI agent automatically is identifying your inventory in real time and saying, we know you have too much inventory here based off of purchase trends. We're going to go in and we're going to test discounting 15% and moving its placement on the site. And then maybe we have to go to 25%. But at that point, we don't have to go because we've now managed the inventory down over the 2-week period. And this is all happening not by human intervention. This is happening by the front end talking to the back end and then automatically updating, the platform or the e-com platform. So to me, that's an agent. You deploy an inventory. Everybody's using inventory management system. We're now just using the data from the inventory management system to say, this is how you basically optimize the selling of these products that are going to expire. That's one example, right? Another example may be, you want to buy a gift for somebody and like, I have a $75 budget and I know I like this product, but create a basket for me because every basket I'm looking at that's pre-made, it's like, I'm not sure. It doesn't really have what I have. So you say, here's a couple of parameters and now build a gift basket for me. And what the system is doing, because these are, like I said, small to medium businesses. It's not like a Harry and David where they're like, we pre-package these 1,000, baskets, right? They're typically in their factory putting the baskets together. So we come back and say, we can let the agent decide the products to put in. So you want X, Y, Z. Now we know we have $53 to play with. Here are products we want to sample and we want to put in. So maybe we're not even going to charge for some of these because we're just like, give me feedback and you have a card in it. Other ones, we know that, hey, these are going to expire. They're part of my perishable. We're going to put one of these in because I'm trying to get rid of that. We know this one has higher margins, so we're going to drop this one in. But we let the agent learn that. And the agent build out the basket. And every time it builds a basket, it gets smarter and smarter because someone can say, yeah, I like this, but I don't want this in the basket, right? So it gets smarter and smarter and helps to build out these baskets that not only maximize the value to the customer, it's maximizing the value to the brand itself because they're getting a lot of they're maximizing margin, they're maximizing inventory, and at the end of the day, they could get feedback on new product coming in. Hey, we've added this to the basket. We'd love your feedback. Here's a card. Tell us about it. and become brand ambassadors at the same time. So little things like that. So like I said, these are just a couple of ideas I put out there, and my AI geniuses may come back and say those are the dumbest ideas ever, and they can. And I'll say, okay, it's fine. If you got something better, let's do it. But it's sort of where my head's at in terms of what we do. And then the platform, more or less, we're going to give our platform away for free. And then you want to build an agent or you want to deploy agents, our job is going to be to deploy agents. We'll start with a couple, and as we hear more and more feedback from clients, we'll build more agents. And then if you want to deploy an agent, you just pay for the agent, because at the end of the day, the cost is minimal, but the potential cost savings or incrementality of putting the agent into your business is significant. So that's sort of where I'm thinking about the business right now. That's innovation in my side. That's different in terms of how we're innovating and coming up with these ideas that are really going to transform the industry.
And you did touch on it, because AI is that hot topic item that everyone's talking about. And I think to the point you made is that sometimes people just add AI to the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the sentence, even if it doesn't really make sense or they're not really incorporating AI. You obviously have a wonderful support team and some very smart people working for you that are able to kind of create these custom agents. What would you say to a CEO who says, hey, look, I want to incorporate AI in my business, but I'm stuck. I don't know how. I don't have that person on my team to do this. What advice would you give that leader who is looking maybe to incorporate AI but doesn't know where to start?
Are you saying within our client base or just any CEO?
We could start with your client base. That would be fine. Sure.
Yeah, I think within our client base, it's like, well, just tell me what your business challenge is and let's solve it. Like, let's figure out how to solve it. And if the business challenge is big enough, which typically it is, and it transcends sort of lots of clients, we say, yeah, that's something we want to solve for, because I don't think anyone's trying to solve for that in the industry. So I think that's the starting point from my side. That's why we have our client advisory board. It's I want that feedback directly from clients who are doing this day to day. I'm not sitting and doing logistics and packaging and shipping and all these things, right, that they have to think about. So I want them to come to me saying, this is my biggest challenge. This is the thing that keeps me up at night. And then for me to come back and say, okay, this is how we'll solve for that using agents is the best way to say it. If I look out in the industry, because I had this eye-opening moment last year. I was at Shop Talk, and I met a guy out of the blue. We were sitting having coffee, and he's like, if I have to hear one more person say AI, and I thought he was from a big brand. I was like, oh, what do you do? He goes, I'm CEO of an AI company. And I was like, well, what? And you don't want to hear about AI? He's like, it doesn't exist. He's like, I just slapped AI on the end of my company. I got $3 million in funding for it. And he goes, but like true AI and the way we're talking about it, like the way that, Agentforce and, that Salesforce talking about it, he said it's still to have that processing in place and the networks, the neural networks in place. He said we're 10 years away from that. The chips can't even do that today for the most part, right? So he is like, we could talk a lot about it in the industry, but like, is it really happening? And then everybody's trying to shift to AI because that's the big talk, but what is it really doing for the business, right? So I would just tell a CEO, like, focus on a business problem and then bring an AI expert in, talk to your clients, find out what the business problem is, and then bring your expert and say, how do we solve for this problem using AI? And there are different types of, I wrote about it, I think it was released or it's going to be released on one of my blog posts, but I just wrote around like, here are the 3 or 4 you should be looking at in terms of, what's going to drive the most value for potentially your customers. But I keep it really, really simple. Like, what are you trying to solve for? Is that something that's just an easy binary, very linear? We solve for it this way. Or is it a bigger problem? It's like, I want to learn as I do this to optimize my efficiency along the way. And I think if you go down a path of, no, this is something that I think needs to learn and get better every time it does it, and then provide suggestion, those types of things are like, okay, that's an AI thing. But if it's a linear, we need an integration for. I'm not going to build, companies like, oh, we build these AI that will build all the code to integrate everything. I was like, or you could just use their API and do it for now. So I'm trying to focus on the meaty problems, the one we can actually solve for and bring value with.
And solve the real business problems. Absolutely.
Real business problems from real people who, when you deploy it, they're like, wow, my operational costs went down 20% last month because you solve for, waste and breakage or whatever it may be, right? So little things like that, from my side are transitional from a business perspective.
And I know you touched on it briefly. You just got your AI fundamentals certificate from IBM. So curious, from your own journey in business, what AI tools or systems do you wish you had had 5 years ago?
I would say for the most part, if you take a look at, I spent the majority of my career talking about big data. And anybody who's in CRM is going to be big data, big data, big data. And I always found it funny because in like every company talks big data, but like from the smallest company I used to work with when I was at Epsilon to the largest, I think they mostly use the same 7 to 12, attributes or segments or audiences across everything they did. And the reason being is you just couldn't, as much data as you tried to ingest, you couldn't use 1/1000th of it, right? Because it would just become, how do you, I just always thought of it as a grid. If you created a grid and said, I have 1,000 data points and 1,000 different things I could do with it, you create this 1,000 by 1,000 grid. It's like, I get no value in trying to do that because I'm going to have such minute populations. I think what AI has done today is it allows you to process this data in a way that lets you get to the smallest population and figure out what to do with it without manual intervention. So I sit out there and I was like, I think, I'll say from like the big problems like big data and saying actually structuring and making use of big data so that we can target large audience segments and micro segments all together in a single campaign and give them very custom audience and targeting. To me, that's sort of at the biggest level. I go back to the simple stuff. I was like creating presentations, doing research on companies. Like I'll just go into Perplexity and say, give me all the financials for this company. Tell me this, tell me that. Who are the top 3 competitors? What are they doing? What's their SEO strategy? And I'll just get a readout of everything. So instead of me spending, 3 to 5 hours researching a company, I'll get a full readout that I could just continue asking. So that it's very simplistic if you think about it, but it's very transformational in terms of research, putting together presentations. Like I'll use Gamma AI and people are like, oh, you used AI to do it. 100%. I'm not a creative person. Good ideas, but try to put them on paper and it looks like, a kindergartner put something together. So it's like I could put the ideas down and it helps me structure sort of the thought process. Things like Gamma AI are just, I think they're great. And they're better tools out there, I know, but it's an example of something that I've used and sort of have asked my team to start using because I want to make sure that, when we present, we use a very clear, concise format that doesn't seem sort of scattered. Those are the basics in terms of, 5 years ago, if I had those things, I'd look a lot smarter than I am now. But, that's the way I think about AI in general, though.
And my last question, I want to be respectful of our time here. Fast forward 2 years from now, what role do you hope AI would play in the way that you're attracting clients, telling your brand story, or scaling your impact?
Yeah, I think that the story, I don't think it's AI telling the story. I think it's our clients telling the story in the market saying, listen, I had these 10 business challenges. I sat down with the team at CV3 and that team basically came back and they employed these agents. And I don't expect my clients to understand what an agent is or what we deployed, but they deployed these agents and here's all the success we've had. And I've been able to take my business from here to here and really focus on what I do best, which is, for some clients, making fudge, for some clients, for selling auto parts, but I could focus on that. And I've given them everything to run because I know that they know our business. I've given them the keys to the marketing side because they've optimized every part of my ecosystem to the point where we've doubled or tripled revenue since, we've started this path with CV3 2 years ago. To me, that's the success story, is our clients basically going out to the market and saying, we started slow. They built trust with us, credibility, and we handed them the keys and they ran with it and they did more with the business than we were able to. So we can actually now focus on our core business and they're focusing on how we tell that story to the market. To me, that's success. And I would take that any day 2 years from now if we have our clients telling that story.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Dino. Really do appreciate it. I know our clients are going to get a ton of value out of listening to this podcast and all of your wonderful insights. So thank you very much for your time today.
Rourke, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great one. And hopefully your clients enjoy this. So
great. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.